James never thought the day would matter, but it stayed with him longer than he could explain. It was supposed to be ordinary. His best friend Michael had asked him to stop by the house to help fix a few things in the living room. James agreed without a second thought. He had been to that house so many times over the years that it almost felt like a second home. He knew every corner, every picture on the wall, every sound the wooden floor made when someone walked across it. When he arrived, Michael greeted him casually, and the two of them got to work. They laughed, argued lightly over how to fix a crooked shelf, and settled into the kind of comfortable rhythm only old friends could share. The atmosphere was easy, predictable, till she walked in. Emily. She was Michael's younger sister. James had known her since they were children, but something about her that day felt completely different. Maybe it was the soft afternoon light streaming in from the window. Maybe it was the way she carried herself with a calm confidence. Or maybe James himself had simply changed without realizing it. Whatever the reason, when Emily stepped into the room, the mood shifted. She was just returning from work. Her hair tied back loosely, a few strands falling naturally across her face. Her blouse was simple, her steps light, and her smile effortless as she greeted them. To her, it was just another day. To James, it was something else. He tried to stay focused on the project, but he couldn't help noticing her. She walked around the room, humming softly as she gathered a few things from the table. Then, without warning, she leaned down to pick up a book that had fallen to the floor. The moment was nothing extraordinary. Nothing anyone else would have noticed, yet it left James caught off guard. Her collar dipped slightly as she bent, and though it was natural and innocent, James felt a rush of heat rise to his face. He looked away quickly, embarrassed not by her but by himself. His heart raced faster than it should have. It was such a small thing, almost unimportant, but it clung to him. He tried to shake it off, forcing himself back into the conversation with Michael, but his mind betrayed him. Every time Emily laughed from the corner of the room, every time she moved gracefully past them, James found himself distracted. He told himself it was nothing, just a fleeting reaction. After all, this was Emily, the same girl he had seen running around the yard as a child. The same girl who used to pester them when they played video games. But in that instant, she wasn't just Michael's little sister anymore. She was a woman, graceful, confident, and suddenly a mystery to him. James avoided her eyes for the rest of the afternoon, worried she might notice his unease. But every time she spoke, her voice lingered in his thoughts longer than it should have. And when she smiled, it felt like the room brightened in a way that had nothing to do with the sunlight. By the time they finished their task, James realized he had barely paid attention to the work at all. He had been too aware of her presence, too caught up in the way a single simple moment had unsettled him. He tried to brush it off as silly, convinced it would fade once he left the house. Yet as he said goodbye that evening, Emily's laughter followed him to the door, and his heart remained restless. That night, lying in bed, James replayed the scene over and over in his head. The tilt of her head, the way she bent down, the warmth of her voice, every detail came back with startling clarity. It made no sense, and he couldn't explain why it mattered so much, but it did. He knew something had shifted inside him, something he couldn't take back. And though he didn't yet understand it, that single afternoon marked the beginning of a change he could no longer ignore. The evening air inside the house felt calm after Michael left the room to take a phone call. James stayed seated on the couch, trying to appear relaxed, but his thoughts were restless. Emily sat by the window with a mug of tea in her hands, her posture graceful yet casual, as if she carried comfort wherever she went. James glanced at her once, then quickly looked away. But she noticed. "You're quiet today," Emily said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice had a warmth that made James's chest tighten. She tilted her head slightly, watching him with curious eyes. "Is something on your mind?" James shifted in his seat. He wanted to answer easily, but his words stumbled. "Just tired, I guess," he replied quickly, hoping it sounded believable. Emily gave a light laugh, the kind that filled the room without effort. "You never were good at hiding things," she teased, her smile gentle. She didn't push him further, but her presence felt like an invitation he wasn't ready to accept. James studied her for a moment when she wasn't looking. The soft glow from the lamp touched her face, and he noticed details he had ignored before: the calm confidence in her eyes, the way her hair framed her cheeks, the quiet strength in her expression. For the first time, he truly saw her not as Michael's sister, but as Emily, a woman with her own light and depth. It unsettled him, yet he couldn't look away. Trying to escape his own thoughts, James asked, "So, how's work been?" Emily leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Busy, but in a good way," she said. "I've been handling new projects, and it feels different, like I'm finally moving forward." She paused, her gaze softening. "Sometimes it's scary, though, taking steps that feel bigger than you are." Her honesty caught James off guard. He expected casual talk, but instead she opened a window into her thoughts. He felt an urge to encourage her, to let her know how much he admired that strength. "I think you're doing better than you realize," he said carefully. "You've always been braver than you give yourself credit for." Emily turned her head, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, her playful smile faded into something deeper, almost searching. "You really think so?" she asked. James nodded, his throat dry. "I do." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, but it wasn't simple either. It carried an energy that neither of them wanted to name. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting a faint glow through the window. Inside, the quiet between them grew stronger, he pulling them closer without a single step. Emily took another sip of her tea, but her gaze lingered on him. "You've changed too, James," she said suddenly. He blinked, caught off guard. "Me, yes," she said, tilting her head slightly. "You used to joke about everything, never serious about anything. But lately, you seem different, more thoughtful, almost like you're holding something back." James froze. The words hit him harder than he expected. She had noticed. She had seen through the mask he tried to wear. He wanted to deny it, to brush it off with a laugh, but the look in her eyes made it impossible. "I guess people grow up," James said finally, forcing a smile. Emily didn't return it immediately. Instead, she studied him as though trying to read a page he had never let anyone see. Her eyes softened, and for a second, James thought she might ask the very question he feared. But she didn't. She leaned back in her chair, letting the air ease again. But the moment left its mark. When Michael returned, the energy in the room shifted back to normal. He walked in, still talking on his phone, and Emily quickly excused herself to the kitchen. James pretended to be occupied with his phone, though his thoughts raced. The rest of the evening passed quickly, but James carried the weight of what had happened. Emily had noticed something in him. She had felt something too. He could see it in her eyes, hear it in her voice. That knowledge made it impossible for him to return to the way things were later. When James stepped outside to leave, Emily came to the doorway to see him off. The night air was cool, and the quiet street stretched endlessly behind him. She stood there with her arms crossed lightly, her expression calm but unreadable. "Drive safe," she said simply. "Yeah," he replied, his voice softer than he intended. Their eyes held for just a second longer than normal, long enough for James to feel the question between them again, unspoken but alive. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he gave a small nod, stepped into his car, and drove away. The road stretched dark and empty, but James's mind was full. He kept replaying the evening in fragments. Her voice when she said, "He seemed different." The quiet weight of her gaze, the pause between her words. None of it was loud or dramatic. But it mattered more than he wanted to admit. By the time he reached home, James understood the truth. Something inside him had shifted beyond his control. Emily wasn't just Michael's sister anymore. She wasn't just part of the background of his life. She had become the quiet center of his thoughts, the question he couldn't stop asking himself. And though nothing had been spoken, nothing had been confessed, James knew that evening marked a turning point. It was no longer about a fleeting moment in the living room. Now it was about a connection that could not be ignored, a spark that both frightened and thrilled him. For James, the world had tilted. For Emily, the silence between them held answers she wasn't ready to give. And for both of them, the path forward was no longer simple. The days that followed seemed ordinary on the surface. But James felt anything but ordinary. He woke up, went to work, laughed with friends. But inside his thoughts circled back to one person, Lee. The image of her sitting by the window. The way her eyes searched his face, her words about him being different, those moments replayed again and again. He tried to convince himself it was just a passing attraction, something that would fade with time, but it didn't. Instead, it grew stronger every time he visited Michael. He found himself on edge, wondering if Emily would be there. Sometimes she was, sometimes she wasn't, but when she entered the room, the air shifted. He noticed everything. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, how she laughed when telling a story, the softness in her voice when she spoke seriously. Little details became heavy with meaning, even when they shouldn't have. But alongside admiration came fear. James was torn. How could he allow himself to feel this way about his best friend's sister? He valued his friendship with Michael too much. One wrong word could break years of trust. And yet he couldn't ignore what was happening inside him. Every time Emily walked into the room, his chest tightened, and every time she walked out, he felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. One evening, while helping Michael move boxes from the garage, James caught himself distracted again. He dropped one of the boxes and Michael laughed, teasing him for being clumsy. James forced a grin, but inside he knew the truth. He hadn't even been thinking about the task at hand. His mind had been on Emily the whole time. Later, when Michael went inside, James stayed behind to catch his breath. He leaned against the wall, running a hand over his face. "What am I doing?" he muttered under his breath. He knew it was dangerous, letting these feelings grow, but he felt powerless to stop them. That same night, Emily walked into the kitchen while James was pouring himself a glass of water. She was wearing a simple sweater, her hair down, looking effortlessly beautiful. James froze, his heart racing as their eyes met. She smiled softly, as if she knew he was lost for words. "You've been quiet lately," she said gently, leaning against the counter. "Not just today. For a while now." James tried to brush it off. "I've been busy. Work, life. You know how it is." But Emily didn't look convinced. She stepped closer, her eyes fixed on his. "That's not it. You've been different. Like you're carrying something you don't want anyone to see." The words hit him hard. She had seen right through him. His throat tightened, and for a moment, he thought about telling her everything the restless nights. The way she filled his thoughts, the feelings he couldn't escape. But fear stopped him. If he confessed, everything could change. If she didn't feel the same, the weight of rejection would crush him, and worse. It could destroy the friendship he valued with Michael. So he forced a smile and shook his head. "You're imagining things," he said lightly. Emily studied him for a long moment, then let out a soft sigh. "Maybe I am," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. She turned to grab something from the counter. But not before James saw a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. That look haunted him. It wasn't just curiosity, it was as if she had been waiting for him to say something. And when he didn't, she quietly accepted the silence. Over the next few days, James carried that moment like a weight. He found himself thinking about what she had said, how close she had stood, the way her eyes lingered. It wasn't his imagination. She felt something too. He could see it in the way she looked at him, the pauses in her sentences. The gentle questions she asked as if fishing for truths he was too afraid to give. At night, James lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Michael, about the loyalty of their friendship. But then he thought about Emily, how she had grown into someone so different from the girl he once knew. How her presence felt like both a comfort and a storm. His heart and mind battled endlessly, neither winning. The breaking point came one afternoon when he caught Emily watching him across the room. He had been helping Michael set up a new shelf, but when he glanced up, Emily's eyes were fixed on him. She didn't look away, not quickly, not with embarrassment. Instead, her expression was steady, curious, almost questioning. And in that gaze, James saw everything he had been trying to deny. His chest tightened. Hey? And for a moment the room felt smaller, the noise around him fading. He wanted to walk across the space to tell her the truth, to stop living in silence. But Michael's voice pulled him back, and the moment slipped away. Still, the look stayed with him, heavy and unforgettable. That night, Emily's words came back to him. Why do you always look at me like you're holding back words you want to say? He had no answer then, but now he knew she had been right. He was holding back. He had been holding back every time he avoided her gaze, every time he changed the subject, every time he pretended his heart wasn't racing when she walked into the room. James realized something terrifying. He couldn't keep pretending forever. The feelings wouldn't fade. The silence was only getting louder. And sooner or later, he would have to face it. But the question remained, what would happen when he did? The Sunday afternoon was quiet, almost too quiet. James drove to Michael's house, telling himself it was just another visit. But inside, he knew it wasn't. Something had been building for weeks, and he couldn't escape it any longer. He told himself he'd go, act normal, help out like always, and leave. But a part of him knew that today would be different when he arrived. Michael greeted him as usual, joking about how James was late. They worked together in the living room, fixing a piece of furniture, talking casually about sports and work. Everything felt routine until Michael's phone rang. He excused himself, stepping outside to take the call, leaving James alone. A few moments later, Emily walked in. She carried a book in her hands and smiled when she saw him. "Hey, James," she said softly, her tone lighter than the afternoon sun slipping through the curtains. "Hey," James replied, his voice tight. She sat down across from him, opening her book but glancing at him more than the pages. The silence stretched, and James felt the weight of every second. His chest ached with words he had never spoken. He shifted, trying to stay calm, but his heart was racing. Finally, Emily lowered the book. "You seem nervous," she said gently. James forced a smile. "Maybe I am." She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. Why? That simple question broke down the walls he had been holding up. He couldn't hide any more. He leaned forward slightly, his hands trembling. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice uneven. She stayed quiet. Her eyes locked on his. Waiting. James took a deep breath, his chest tightening with every word. "That day, when you bent down to pick up that book, I don't know why, but it changed something for me. I started seeing you differently. And ever since, I can't stop thinking about you. I've tried to ignore it. I've tried to pretend it doesn't matter, but it does. I care about you more than I should." The words hung in the air, raw and unpolished. James felt exposed, vulnerable, almost foolish. His heart pounded as he waited for her to speak, fearing what her answer might be. Emily didn't respond right away. She looked down for a moment, her fingers brushing the edge of her book. The silence felt endless. Finally, she lifted her eyes, and what James saw in them wasn't rejection, it was softness. "James," she whispered, her voice steady but tender. "I felt it too." Its breath caught. She continued, "I didn't know if I should admit it. You're Michael's best friend, and I didn't want to make things complicated. But I noticed, the way you looked at me, the way you tried to hide it, I noticed." James's shoulders relaxed, though his heart still raced. Relief washed through him, mixed with disbelief. He had expected silence, maybe even rejection. But not this, never this. "I thought I was imagining it," he said, his voice quieter now. Emily smiled softly. "No, you weren't." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, two people caught in a truth that had been waiting to surface. The room felt smaller, warmer, as if the walls themselves were holding their secret. James reached out slowly, unsure if he should. Emily didn't pull away. Her hand met his, her touch gentle but certain. The simple contact carried more weight than any words could. It was an answer, a promise, and a beginning all at once. But reality pressed in. James thought of Michael, of their friendship, of the risk. "What about him?" he asked softly. Emily's smile faded into something more serious. "That's what makes this hard," she admitted. "He trusts you. He trusts me. And if we're not careful, this could hurt him." James nodded, the weight of truth pressing on him. "I know. That's what's been holding me back." Emily squeezed his hand gently. "We can take it slow. We don't have to rush. But don't regret telling me, James. I'm glad you did." He looked at her, really looked at her, and realized this was the moment he had been waiting for. Not grand gestures, not dramatic confessions, just honest to quiet and fragile. But real. The sound of footsteps outside the door pulled them back. Michael was returning. James and Emily let go of each other's hands quickly, their eyes meeting one last time, filled with unspoken words.